Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in AP English, and we now turn to Homer's Iliad, book number 2. We've finished with book 1, and now we will work with book 2, review. I hope that you've watched our lecture on Iliad 1. If you haven't, run to learnstrong.net. Go down that left-hand side, find the AP folder, find our introductory comments, as well as our comments about book 1. Now, we ended book 1 with Zeus and Hera in bed, Achilles pouting in his tent, because, of course, his teammate, his girl, his Geras, has been taken, Briseis has been taken from him. In book 2, we're going to have 2 important things which will happen, okay? The first is sometimes referred to as Zeus's false dream, or the dream of hopeless expectation. Zeus is going to tell Agamemnon, today's the day, go fight the Trojans and you will win. And of course, the whole project here is to, for Zeus, answer Thetis's request, Achilles' mom's request, that the Greeks will get seriously trounced because, again, they allowed Agamemnon to take away Achilles' girl Briseis and all of that. The second thing that will happen, and that's why this book is often not read and taken as seriously today, is you get this long list of what is sometimes referred to as the list of the ships, the catalog of the ships, the catalog of the chariots. You have a listing of everybody that was involved in this grand war, and I think there's a lot to say about this, actually, and the kleos that's a part of this. In other words, all these people who fought. This is, for a number of the people, last time they'll ever be mentioned in the Iliad, and yet it's significant that they are mentioned in the Iliad. Now, before we start, first just to remind, my expectation is that you're reading this material on your own and coming to this lecture then as secondary, as help, as supplemental. That's my hope. Remember, our learning theory is always the attempt to connect new to old, and we do that through our reading by answering those 3 guiding questions at level 1. What does the text say? Summary. At level 2, what does the text mean? 2A, themes, messages. 2B, rhetoric. And again, here we're focusing primarily on symbolism and on irony and those elements that would be considered epic, parts of epic poetry. And then finally at level 3, how can I relate this at 3A to other texts, and at 3B, how can I relate this to myself? We'll do our best, I hope, to be able to play that game. Now, book 1 review. Remember, in book 1, we began with the invocation of the muse. We then had Agamemnon and Achilles fighting over the girls, and of course their teammate and all of that. Ultimately, Achilles loses his girl, which leads him to go to his mother, Thetis, and ask, please, will you help me? And of course, she goes to Zeus, and Zeus, after a little fight with Hera, decides, okay, I'm going to help Achilles out, even though in the end, the Trojans are going to lose the city of Troy. For a while in this poem, it's going to look like they are the winners. By the way, note the genius of why Homer, the poet, might be doing this. This is a Greek poem where the Greeks, for much of the poem, get trounced pretty good. I mean, they get beat pretty badly by Hector and the Trojans. Well, how can you explain that if you're a Greek warrior? I mean, no Greek audience wants to hear about how the Greeks lose, especially because Achilles isn't involved. What's wrong with them? They have a beautiful answer now. It's got nothing to do with the fact that Ajax and the rest of the great Greek warriors were inept. It has to do with the fact that Zeus, for a while, was allowing the Trojans to have some taste of victory, but in the end, the Greeks will win the battle, right? All right, let's do a brief summary now of book 2. First, we begin with the dream that is sent from Zeus. It is a lie to Agamemnon. You will win if you go up against Troy. We have an interesting test then by Agamemnon. He wants to know if his soldiers are ready to fight or cut and run. And guess what? When he tells them that they can cut and run, that's exactly what they do. But then we will have 2 important players in book 2, Odysseus and Nestor. Both of them will say to the soldiers, how dare you? We have to go and fight. And so they all will decide to fight. Nestor will suggest to Agamemnon the way in which he should arrange his troops. And that will, of course, give the poet the opportunity to give us the catalog of ships, the catalog of chariots, and then finally a listing of a few of the great Trojans who will fight. All right? We will begin in the opening lines, lines 1 through 84, with this Zeus's dream, the dream that will come looking like Nestor. In roughly lines 25 and following, the dream will say, still asleep, Agamemnon, the son of Atreus, that skilled breaker of horses? How can you sleep all night, a man weighed down with duties? Your armies turning over their lives to your command, responsibilities so heavy. Listen to me quickly. I bring you a message sent by Zeus, a world away, but he has you in his heart, he pities you now. Zeus commands you to arm your long-haired Achaeans to attack at once, full force. Now you can take the broad streets of Troy. The immortal gods who hold Olympus clash no more. Hera's appeals have brought them round, and all agree griefs from Zeus are about to crush the men of Troy. But keep this message firmly in your mind. Remember, let no loss of memory overcome you when the sweet grip of slumber sets you free. With that, the dream departed, leaving him there, his heart racing with hopes that would not come to pass. The poet every once in a while steps in and tells us he thought he would take the city of Priam then, that very day. The fool. How could he know what work the Father had in mind? So we then are going to get this is a poem of speeches, and we're going to get a speech by Agamemnon, where in that speech he's going to give these guys a test, his sailors, his soldiers a test. But first, according to the time-honored custom, Agamemnon says, I'll test the men with a challenge. Tell them all to crowd the oarlocks, cut and run in their ships. But you can take up your battle stations at every point, command them, hold them back. This is what he says to his generals. So in other words, he calls his generals together and he says, A, we're going to go and fight against the Trojans. B, I want you and me to find out how many of these guys are actually committed to the cause as opposed to they're ready to cut and run. When I tell them to leave, don't let them leave. I'm just interested to see, right? Our next bit of work here is the calling of the troops together. We have this amazing epic simile. Watch this. And out, I'm at line 100. And out he marched, leading the way from council. The rest sprang to their feet. The sceptered kings obeyed the great field marshal. Rank and file streamed behind and rushed like swarms of bees. Remember a simile comparing Lycurgus. Swarm of bees pouring out of a hollow rock, burst on endless burst, bunched in clusters, seething over the first spring blooms, dark hordes swirling into the air this way, that way. So the many-armed platoons from the ships and tents came marching on close file along the deep wide beach to crowd the meeting grounds. And rumor, Zeus's crier, like wildfire, another simile, blazing among them, whipped them on. The troops assembled, the meeting grounds shook. And now you have the meeting and the test that will now come. And this is the speech that Agamemnon will give. Friends, fighting Danaans. Again, all these words mean Greeks. Aids in arms of Ares. Kronos' son has trapped me in madness, blinding ruin. Note the irony of this. Kronos' son Zeus has in fact trapped him, but what Agamemnon's going to say is, he's trapped me because he let me think that when we came to the walls of Troy we would win. We're not going to win. Again, the test. Zeus is a harsh, cruel god. He vowed to me, by the way, I'm at line 130, he vowed to me long ago. He bowed his head, and we're back to that bowing of the head as he did with Thetis in book 1. He bowed his head that I should never embark for home till I had brought the walls of Ilium crashing down, but now I see he only plotted brutal treachery. Now he commands me back to Argos in disgrace. Whole regiments of my men destroyed in battle. So it must please his overweening heart. Who knows? Father Zeus has lopped the crowns of 1,000 cities. True, and Zeus will lop still more. His power is too great. What? Humiliation. Even for generations still to come to learn that Achaean army so strong, so vast, fought a futile war. I mean, you can get the sense here of the reverse psychology that's being played. In other words, if we cut and go home, for generations afterwards, we're going to be remembered as the group of guys that couldn't get the job done. Right? We are still fighting it, no end in sight, and battling forces we outnumber by far. Say that Trojans and Argives both agreed to swear a truce, to seal their oaths in blood, and opposing sides were tallied out in full. We'll see this, by the way, in book 3, where they will try to reach a truce. Count one by one the Trojans who live in Troy. But count out Achaeans out by 10-man squads, and each squad pick a Trojan to pour its wine. Many Achaean tens would lack their steward then. His point is how many more of us there are than of them. That's how far we outnumber them, I'd say. Achaeans to Trojans, the men who hail from Troy at least. But they have allies called from countless cities, fighters brandishing spears who block my way, who throw me far off course, thwarting my will to plunder Ilium's ragged walls. And now, 9 years, this tells us that we are now into the 9th, going on to the 10th year of the war. 9 years of almighty Zeus have marched by, our ship timbers rot, and the cables snap and fray, and across the sea our wives and helpless children wait in the halls. Note the irony of this, because this is Agamemnon speaking, and of course Clytemnestra is waiting for his return, and she will of course jack him when he gets there, right? Wait for our return, and our work drags on, unfinished as always, hopeless, the labor of war that brought us here to Troy. So come, follow my orders, all obey me now. Cut and run, sail home to the fatherland we love. We'll never take the broad streets of Troy. It says 2 things. 1, Zeus basically lied to me. He told us that we were going to win this thing. We ain't going to win this thing. So I'm going to cut, we're going to run, we're going to call it a day. 2, he says, there is no way. It's hopeless for us, right? We cannot do it. It's impossible. That's a test. We're, the next line, testing his men. But he only made the spirit race inside their chests. And then we're told, off they go, running away, right? Well, it will be here then that you're going to have Athena who's going to get involved. I'm at line 193 or 194 or so. The bright-eyed goddess Pallas lost no time. Down she flashed from the peaks of Mount Olympus, quickly reached the ships and found Odysseus first. Now this relationship between Odysseus and Athena, we're obviously going to talk a lot about it in our study of the Odyssey. Let's just note it here. That's who she goes to find, Odysseus, who, by the way, hasn't run for his ship. A masterman like Zeus, still standing fast. He'd not laid a hand on his black bench hull. Such anguish racked his heart and fighting spirit. Now, close beside him, the bright-eyed goddess stood and urged him on. Royal son of Laertes, Odysseus, great tactician, what, is this the way? All you Argives flying home to your fatherland, tumbling into your oar-swept ships, leaving Priam and all the men of Troy a trophy to glory over. Helen of Argos, Helen, for whom so many Argives lost their lives in Troy, far from native land. No, don't give up now. Range the Achaean ranks with your winning words. Hold back each man you find. Don't let them haul their rolling ships to sea. So it will be up to Odysseus. Odysseus will go. He'll grab the scepter of Agamemnon, and he will then be ready to go to work to try to bring together all of the troops. And the way he does it is basically by shaming the men into fighting. Right? He is able to bring all of the men together, and to bring all of them to sit down. However, we have a very interesting, I think it's a very subtle kind of little story vignette within the text. I'm with you now at lines 245 and following. The armies took their seats, marshaled into ranks, but one man, Thersites, still railed on nonstop. His head was full of obscenities, teeming with rank, all for no good reason, insubordinate, baiting the kings, anything to provoke some laughter from the troops. Here was the ugliest man who ever came to Troy. By the way, we're going to meet in Book 2 of Iliad the ugliest man who came to Troy and the most handsome man who ever came to Troy. Here, the ugliest man who ever came. Brandy-legged he was, with one foot clubbed, both shoulders humped together, curving over his caved-in chest, and bobbing above them, his skull warped to a point, sprouting clumps of scraggly, woolly hair. He's an ugly guy. Achilles despised him most, Odysseus too. He was always abusing both chiefs, but now he went for majestic Agamemnon, hollering out, taunting the king with strings of cutting insults. The Achaeans were furious with him, deeply offended, but he kept shouting at Agamemnon, spewing his abuse. Still moaning and groaning, mighty Atres? Why now? What are you panting after now? Your shelters packed with the lion's share of bronze, plenty of women too, crowding your lodges. Best of the lot, the beauties we hand you first. Whenever we take some strong horse, still more gold you're wanting, more ransom a son of the stallion-breaking Trojans might just fetch from Troy, though I or another hero drags him back in chains. Or a young woman is it, to spread in couple, to bed down for yourself apart from all the troops? How shameful you are. By the way, notice this is some of the language that Achilles himself was saying in Book 1, right, to Agamemnon. How shameful for you, the high and mighty commander, to lead the sons of Achaea into bloody slaughter. Sons? No, my soft friends, wretched excuses. Women, not men of Achaea. Home we go in our ships, abandon him here in Troy to wallow in all his prizes. He'll see if the likes of us have propped him up or not. Look, now it's Achilles, a greater man he disgraces, seizes, and keeps his prize, tears her away himself. But no gall in Achilles. Achilles lets it go. If not Atrides, that outrage would have been your last. In other words, we're told that Thersites is going to taunt, and Odysseus has had enough of it. He tells him to shut up, and finally he whacks him with Agamemnon's scepter, and it's here that we're told he cracked the scepter across Thersites' back and shoulders. The rascal doubled over. I'm at line 310. Tears streaking his face, and a bloody welt bulged between his blades. Under the stroke of the golden scepter studs, he squatted low, cringing, stunned with pain, blinking like some idiot, rubbing his tears off dumbly with a fist. Their morale was low, and I think this is the key. But the men laughed now, good hearty laughter breaking over Thersites' head. Glancing at neighbors, they would shout, "A terrific stroke, 1,000 terrific strokes." He's carried off Odysseus, taking the lead in tactics, mapping battle plans. He's put a stop to this babbling, foul-mouthed fool. Never again, I'd say, will our gallant comrade risk his skill to attack the kings with insults. What's going on here? I think this is a powerful example of scapegoating. Odysseus knows that the men agree with much of what Thersites has had to say here. This is a stupid thing for us to be fighting and dying over some woman that was taken, Menelaus' wife or something like that. Let's all go home. And when Thersites says it, and then he gets jacked by Odysseus and all the men laugh, Odysseus is able to bring all the men together. The power of the scapegoat. Put it in your notes, the power of the scapegoat. It is a reminder of the ways in which men can be easily manipulated into agreeing that, hey, you know what, maybe it is the right thing to stay here and fight and die for this cause, right? Next, we will have Nestor, who will give a little speech. He will say, Agamemnon, I'm at line 330, 331. I'm sorry, I'm working still with Odysseus, right? So the soldiers bantered, but not Odysseus, and now he's ready to speak. At line 330, 331. Agamemnon, now my king, the Achaeans are bent on making you a disgrace in the eyes of every man alive. Yes, they failed to fulfill their promise sworn that day they sailed here from the stallion land of Argos, that not until you had raised the rugged walls of Troy would they sail home again. In other words, Odysseus reminds the men by talking to Agamemnon. These men all here, they made a vow, and they're about to break it. Shame on them. But look at them now. Like green, Odysseus is great with insults. Like green, defenseless boys or widowed women whimpering to each other, wailing to journey back. Let's pay attention to the ways in which this is a text of propaganda. And it teaches us the ways that propaganda works. Notice Odysseus is saying about these men, you're a bunch of wimps. But he doesn't say it to them. He says it to Agamemnon. Look at all these men who made their promises to you, and now look at them. They're all a bunch of fraidy cats, scaredy cats, if you will, right? True, they've labored long. The genius of Odysseus. Now after he's insulted them, he's going to give them a reason why they should be upset. True, they've labored long. They're desperate for home. Any fighter cut off from his wife for 1 month would chafe at the benches, moaning in his ship penned down by gales and heavy surging seas. A month? Look at us. This is the 9th year come round, the 9th we've hung on here. Who could blame the Achaeans for chafing, bridling beside the beaked ships? Now it's fascinating to me that it is Odysseus saying this, Odysseus who is going to long to get home, Odysseus who is still 10 years away from ever getting back home to his Penelope and his Telemachus. It will be 20 years, of course, for Odysseus that he's away. Notice here he says it. To Odysseus, he's really speaking to the men, and he says, we have a reason to be upset. We've been here for 9 going on 10 years. This is a long time to be away from our wives and our families, right? But still, what a humiliation it would be to hold out so long, then sail home empty-handed. Courage, my friends. And notice the shift. And this is what makes Odysseus brilliant. He moves from talking to Agamemnon to talking directly now to, he calls them his friends. Courage, my friends. Hold out a little longer till we see if Calchas divined the truth or not. Calchas, you'll remember, is the seer that we saw in book 1. We all recall that moment. Who could forget it? We were all witnesses then. And what Odysseus does brilliantly is he says, hey, do you remember that moment long, long ago? And it will be here that Odysseus will finally have his men. What moment? Well, this is a very important story, and it's a way to read much of what goes on in the Iliad, where we will have these omens, a sign, if you will. Watch. He says, do you remember? Who could forget it? We were all witnesses then. I'm at roughly line 355. All, at least the deadly spirits have not dragged away. In other words, those of us, he's subtly reminding them that there are some people who witnessed the omen he's about to talk about, but now they're dead. In other words, why would we pack up our ships and leave, and then all those men who died here already die in vain? Why? It seems like yesterday or the day before, when our vast armada gathered, moored at Alus, freighted with slaughter bound for Priam's Troy. We were all busy then, milling around a spring and offering victims up on the holy altars, full sacrifice to the gods to guarantee success, under a spreading plane tree where the water splashed, glittering in the sun. when a great omen appeared. Now, I've got to just mention this thing about plane trees and gardens and snakes that are soon to come. And Paradise Lost is immediately going to come to mind. Milton knew exactly what the game he was playing in Paradise Lost. Go and take a look at those lectures. We'll meet Paradise Lost and Milton later. When a great omen appeared, a snake, and his back streaked red with blood, a thing of horror. Olympian Zeus himself had launched him into the clean light of day. He slid from under the altar, glided up the tree, and there the brood of a sparrow, helpless young ones, teetered high on the topmost branch tips, towering under the leaves there. 8, they were all told, and the mother made the 9th. She'd borne them all, chirping to break the heart. But the snake gulped them down, and the mother cried out for her babies, fluttering over him. He coiled, struck, fanging her wing, a high, thin shriek. Notice we have nature fighting, right? But once he'd swallowed down the sparrow with her brood, the son of crooked Kronos, who sent the serpent forth, turned him into a sign, a monument clear to see. Zeus struck him to stone. And we stood by, amazed that such a marvel came to light. So then, when those terrible, monstrous omens burst in on the victims we were offering to the gods, Calchas swiftly revealed the will of Zeus. Why, struck dumb now, my long-haired Achaeans. Zeus, who rules the world, has shown us an awesome sign, an event long in the future, late to come to birth, but the fame of that great work will never die. Note the irony of that line, given that we're reading the Iliad today, right? As the snake devoured the sparrow with her brood, 8, and the mother made the 9th, she'd borne them all, so we will fight in Troy that many years, and then, in the 10th, we'll take her broad streets. So that day the prophet revealed the future, and now, look, by God, it all comes to pass. Up with you, all of you Argives, geared for combat. Stand your ground right here until we take the mighty walls of Priam. Well, this is a speech of